Common Ground. A Hubert and Dimitri story. Written by Sailor Artemis. Read by Arashi. Content warnings include blood and injury treatment and Dimitri's ghosts. Dimitri runs a cautious, gloved finger along the rim of his teacup, studying the blend inside, as though he might be capable of discerning whether or not the drink's been poisoned by gaze alone. Pitiful, that. Hubert specifically chose silver cups, so he could see they were free of tarnish, even if he does have a variety of undetectable toxins at his disposal. But if he did intend to assassinate the king, and unfortunately he does not, he would not have chosen a method and time so obvious. This is a normal tea party. This is quite kind of you. Dimitri smiles, tight-lipped and hesitant. Hubert doesn't return it.
Hubert doesn't return it. You know my favorite tea. Chamomile. Chamomile, Hubert repeats, unsure of what more to say.
He's never been particularly good with people, nor has he ever entirely understood the appeal of things like small talk and shallow friendships. Dimitri doesn't make it any easier. King of Fargus and once sworn enemy of Her Majesty and the Empire. There's no reason he and Hubert should be seated across from each other as well-intended comrades. At the very cores, they are misaligned and, if Hubert had his way, Dimitri would have been dead the very moment he stepped foot in Enbar. But Edelgard is a forgiving emperor, and if it is her wish to reach out her hand to Dimitri, Hubert has no right to stand in her way. He will, however, do all he can to keep an eye on him. While threats and torture may be off the table, that will not stop him from ensuring Her Majesty remains unharmed. Hubert attempts to break the silence, calling on his mind to think of anything worthwhile to say. He settles on, "It's warmer in Enbar than it is in Ferdiad," and just narrowly catches sight of Dimitri stopping himself from groaning. "Are you adjusting to it well?" Yes, it's fine," Dimitri sighs. "Hubert, I do not want to seem ungrateful for the gesture, but I must ask if there is any point to this. Is there business we must discuss?"
I did not think you would be so put off by an attempted friendly chatter. I am merely trying to quell hostilities.
Perhaps his words have too much bite to them, because almost immediately Dimitri scowls. His tea goes untouched for the rest of the visit. Ever since that pitiful attempted conversation, Dimitri has been avoiding Hubert. What began as a professional enough relationship is now barely amiable. While they tolerate each other in meetings for Edelgard's sake, they no longer speak at all outside of them. Not even the briefest of greetings when they pass each other in the palace halls, nor words of gratitude when Hubert stops by the room temporarily serving as Dimitri's office to deliver documents at Her Majesty's behest. That simply will not do. While Hubert's always been hesitant to trust him, the complete silence increases his worries tenfold. If Dimitri is plotting something against Edelgard, Hubert has no way of knowing. The siblings just returned this morning from a brief stint in battle, wielding Amir and Eredbar alike in a relatively painless skirmish against bandits plaguing Hevring territory.
Really, more of a publicity stunt to show the people the Empire and Kingdom coming together than a real mission.
Still, it seems Dimitri found some way to mess things up. Almost as soon as they'd returned,
he ran off to his room to nurse an injury.
What better olive branch to extend than stopping by to check on him? Dimitri surely won't want to see him, but Hubert will display his best bedside manner and prove he harbors no ill will. He raps his fist 3 times against the wood of the bedroom door, and, when not immediately answered, turns the knob and lets himself enter. Dimitri stands across the room in front of the vanity mirror, his teeth holding the end of a bandage as he wraps it around his damaged upper left arm. Back at the academy, when Felix used to go on and on about how Dimitri was no man, but a boar, Hubert often agreed with him. Now, however, Dimitri looks more like a guilty puppy, stealing food from the street. Hubert breathes a short, clipped sigh, and steps forward,
wresting the bandage from Dimitri's teeth, tearing off the end he bit, and setting about taking care of it himself.
Though disgruntled, Dimitri knows better than to protest, though he does not entirely deign to accept Hubert's assistance. "It's not a bad injury," he grumbles, despite the blood soaking through the gauze. "I can take care of it myself." "Clearly," Hubert quips, exchanging the blood-soaked bandage for a dry cloth to dab at the crimson streaking across Dimitri's scarred skin.
This wound, too, seems like it will scar. Quite the notable injury for what should have been a simple fight. "You must know better than to run into battle so recklessly. What would Her Majesty think?"
Dimitri scowls. "I took a hit for her. Does she know? I didn't want to worry her."
As if that would save him from Hubert's wrath.
"Her Majesty does not need protection in battle, least of all from you." Though born of concern, odd and out of place for the man he is helping, his words are sharp, harsh enough that they feel meant for a petulant child rather than a king. Dimitri's frown deepens, but he takes his reprimand without protest. "You should not be throwing your life away so recklessly, even for Her Majesty's sake." "Right." As Hubert wraps a fresh bandage around the cleaned injury, Dimitri's gaze settles somewhere in the mirror, focusing on something past the two of them. When Hubert looks, all that seems to be back there is Dimitri's messily made bed and the wall. Nothing important. "There,"
he says, tucking the end of the cloth in to keep it secured.
"Try not to get injured again. I only have so much time to waste on you and your antics." Dimitri stays silent as he returns to leave.
His stare still holds fast onto whatever he caught sight of in the mirror, the color drained from his face, as though he's seen a ghost.
Hubert almost feels ready to give up on this friendship scheme of his.
No matter what he tries, he makes no progress in gaining Dimitri's trust. The king remains closed off, bitter to the point that Edelgard's even asked what Hubert's done to him. Nothing to deserve this animosity, he'd assured her. She hadn't believed him.
It's to the point that Hubert has taken to asking others from the now disbanded Black Eagle Strike Force to keep an eye on Dimitri for him.
They do a good job placating his worries, as prone to teasing and complaining as they can be, but there is much that bothers Hubert. Most notably, exactly what Dimitri gets up to at night.
They share an equally abysmal sleep schedule,
roaming the halls of the castle long after everyone else has seen themselves to bed.
Dimitri does not so much acknowledge Hubert in these moments. He keeps his head down and mutters harsh words beneath his breath that Hubert can never quite make out, no matter how close he gets. It appears harmless. All he really does is talk to himself and walk in circles around the first-floor throne room,
his thick cloak dragging along the ground behind him.
At times, it sounds as though he's cursing someone.
At other times, like he is pleading for something to end, or to be left alone. Hubert cannot glean the specifics, but the pain in Dimitri's hushed tone makes the hair on the back of his neck stand up and fills him with a sense of dread.
Long after the single bell rings to denote the midnight hour, Dimitri slips off the well-worn path of his insomnia and into the palace garden. Hubert hangs back by the doorway, cloaked in shadow, and watches as he takes a seat on the bench and lets his head fall into his hands. It isn't like that," Dimitri says, louder than before, and echoed by the open space around him. It sounds as though he's speaking to someone, but with the tone of his voice and no one in sight, Hubert can surmise that someone is not truly here. "Please, stop asking for that." Briefly, Hubert considers leaving him alone. Whatever this is, it's clear that Dimitri's come this far from his room for privacy.
The last thing he'd want would be to talk about it with Hubert of all people.
Still, something keeps him from turning away. Perhaps the want to solve the mystery of this. Or maybe that small twinge of concern still haunts him, as it did when he helped him fix his bandage. With a deep breath, Hubert steps free of the shadows. "Your Majesty," he quietly says.
Dimitri jumps, his wide blue eye darting from Hubert's face to hands, looking for a weapon.
"Hubert!" He shakes his head, and then drops it, gaze falling to the cracks in the stone, as though he might be able to slip away from him.
"Please, if you intend to kill me, do not prolong it. I'd much prefer you get it over with."
Hubert blinks, needing a second to process those words. So Dimitri thinks he's come to kill him? Of course, he'd been looking for poison in his tea, but Hubert hadn't thought Dimitri actually believed him a wanton murderer who would assassinate against his liege's wishes, even if he had thought it was the safest course of action at first. "Her Majesty wouldn't want that," he says. "That's never seemed to stop you before," Dimitri mutters. Hubert scowls, and though Dimitri is still staring at the ground and refusing to even look at him, it seems he can sense how those words have set him.
"My apologies. It's been a long few weeks."
Something pangs in Hubert's chest, the faintest thrum of sympathy.
It's been a difficult time for them all, adjusting to a newfound alliance between nations all of Fodland once thought would destroy each other with their opposite ideals.
The politics, the people, don't merge as easily as they all wish they would.
Dimitri and Edelgard, though trying to rekindle their familial ties of youth, still argue constantly over what to do with the remnants of the church, and whether or not Edelgard's reforms suit Fargus's needs.
Dimitri's struggling most of all, it seems. He's in an unfamiliar place, surrounded by those who used to be enemies, those who regard him with nothing but skepticism. Hubert by far the biggest culprit of that hostility. Perhaps he hasn't been trying hard enough to understand the situation Dimitri's in. Inviting him to tea and checking on his injuries can only go so far, when those are not the things Dimitri needs. Hubert's been too hard on him. Silently, he takes a seat on the bench beside Dimitri, staring out at the moonlit bushes and flowers before them. They stay like that for a while, seated beside each other, and saying nothing at all. Then Dimitri speaks.
"Do you have ghosts, Hubert?"
he asks. When Dimitri turns to face him, the moonlight shines on the bags beneath his eye. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. Hubert honestly wouldn't be surprised. "Do they ever speak to you? Demand things?" Their ghosts are not the same. Hubert has thousands of spectres trailing him, lost souls that cling to the blood staining his magic-burnt hands.
Dimitri is haunted by those he knew, those he has lost.
"I've sullied my hands with too much blood," Hubert responds. "Were I to spend my time placating the dead, I would have no time for those that matter. For the living." Dimitri laughs when he says that, hollow and mirthless.
"How freeing that sounds, to not have anyone leaning over your shoulder, asking for things you cannot give them, to have no one you've lost and feel you owe your life to. I must admit, I am rather envious." Hubert closes his eyes. In another world, might he not be dissimilar to Dimitri? Were he to lose everyone he cares for, might they haunt him?
Might Edelgard? Would he roam the halls as a ghost himself, pleading for the corrupted vision of her lost soul to leave him alone? Blood has always stained his hands. He is well accustomed to the weight of iron and crimson. But it seems to completely drown Dimitri. Had the war ended differently, would Hubert drown too? "Even now that the Empire and the Kingdom are at peace," Dimitri continues, quieter than before, "they still demand her head." Oddly, Hubert does not feel any concern for Edelgard's safety. "You would not do that," he says, with confidence atypical of his usual dealings with Dimitri. "You don't know that. You've had ample opportunity to kill her already, have you not?" Dimitri narrows his eyes, but doesn't say anything. "And you took that gash in your arm for her. I'm certain your ghosts were calling on you to let her meet her demise." The look in Dimitri's eye is one of recognition. Hubert hit it right on the head. "I thought you a threat to her once. But I do not think so now. I cannot make your ghosts go away, but I will do what I can to alleviate your burden." They are not so diametrically opposed as he once thought. They are tied by their loyalty to others, to Edelgard. For all their differences, they do not want to see her hurt, and they both want to see the peace between their nations succeed. For that reason, Hubert supposes he no longer needs the pretense of a false friendship to keep an eye on him. There's plenty of reason for it to be real, after all.
"Thank you," Dimitri whispers. "I do wish it would make the insomnia easier, but it's nice to talk about it with someone."
Hubert stands. "In that case, if we are to be out here for a while, perhaps it would do you well to have some tea as we chat. Allow me to prepare some. I'll only be a minute." And Dimitri softens, vulnerable, in a way Hubert's never seen him open himself up for anyone but Edelgard.
"I'd like that."
The end.